Hello everyone, welcome to our Woodland Walk for the month of the Older Tree. And it is a great joy to be talking to Lindsay Branham today, who is I would say polymath, given the huge amount of experience and incredible project. She's an Emmy-nominated film director. She has an Emmy-nominated film, and she started a film production company and has done some incredible work looking at human rights abuses and violence, and just the power of her work, the artistry, the emotion in her filming and the way the stories are told is something that must be checked out. So please look at her website. But the conversation we'll be having today is going to be focusing on her other work, which is around nature connectedness and the human-nature relationship. Lindsay's doing a PhD in Cambridge University on the human-nature relationship. She's writing a book called Heartwood about communicating with trees, and that book is going to be out in next year. And when the book is out, we will ask Lindsay to come back and speak to us about it. The book will continue information about how to communicate with trees, which is going to be so exciting for everyone in this community. But also, Lindsay is an eco-doula and is profoundly engaged in this work of, I suppose, healing in this time, and how we can heal by recognizing the reality of the situations we're in and really connecting with nature in a visceral, embodied way for this reciprocal relationship to emerge. There's so many other things that I haven't covered because there are so many other projects that Lindsay is doing, but that's enough of an introduction now. And Lindsay, my first question for you is, well, firstly, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I love what Acer is doing, being organized around trees. It's just brilliant. So absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. And our tree for this month is the older tree, which is all about resilience. Alders grow on the riverbank and they suck up the flood waters, and they let it galvanize them, they get stronger. Mm-hmm. So think about how we can let the flood waters that we are growing in at this time galvanize us, make us stronger. And I wanted to ask you, Lindsay, based on all the work you've done, your experiences to date, your work with films, your work with trees, your work with nature, with people, with groups, how does that idea of resilience resonate with you? What does that mean to you? And how do you use your different work as an artist, community organizer, researcher? How do you use your different ways of working to support your own resilience, but also the resilience of people that you communicate with and reach?
Yeah, beautiful question. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to consider the different definitions of resilience that are culturally specific and contextual to certain environments. So what resilience means to a Westerner living in a city is going to be very different than what resilience means to, let's say, the communities in northern DRC and the Democratic Republic of Congo that I've done a lot of work with. I remember interviewing a village leader in northern DRC working on this film project about child soldiers coming back into their communities and the type of stigma that they would experience. And we were trying to figure out, okay, how can we create a film, a piece of art that could help their community understand what they had been through? And he talked about, in our community, there's no such thing as an individual. We are a hand. So every finger is a part of the hand that is a part of the body. So just the notion of individual-based resilience is incomprehensible in these communities. Resiliency is something that's co-created, that's built between not just human to human, but human to different species. It's an interspecies, ecological kind of chaotic emergence that happens when there's collaboration, when there's cooperation. Of course, we're now really kind of like on the same page in ecological science around trees collaborate. They don't, try to dominate each other, which was the common perception for a long time. And so what is it to actually be deeply invested in the well-being of our neighbors? That's resiliency. It's not just, am I well? Am I flourishing? It's, we are only well if the entire ecosystem is well. And I think, with climate change, we're facing a time where we can't live in the myth and the illusion anymore that well-being is even possible as an isolated individual unit. We're seeing how weather systems affect the whole world, how political, geopolitical events are changing futures for people that are not physically or geographically in that place. And so I think it requires now like a complete recapitulation and really listening to the more ancient wisdom that has been here in indigenous communities for a very, very long time, about the necessity of inter-belonging and inter-being. I'll pause there.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. And it resonates so much with what we're trying to do in our community is come out of that striving to be able to do it on our own and rest back in that the interconnected mycelial networks that we don't have to reach out for, but we realize we just stand on, that this is our birthright, this is how we are interconnected, and to not have to somehow find it, but to just rest in it because it's already there. We just need to reinvigorate it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see, so in terms of this huge move that we have to, maybe this kind of key transition of our time of going from this individualistic model to understanding our true into like the urgency of coming into interconnectedness again, how do you envisage it happening? Do you have any sense of kind of like the ways, the means, the methods, the practices that we can start to move in that direction? You mentioned the indigenous of the wisdom of indigenous groups. How do we humbly connect with that? Like, what's your response to that?
I think part of the equation is for all of us to become very connected to the place that we are and begin listening deeply with the whole body to the ecological environment that houses us, homes us every single day. And it can be really overwhelming to try to consider how to stop these systems globally. But I think what indigenous wisdom teaches is that how can we learn to care from a place that has raised us if we don't know who has raised us? So to me, the first step is becoming re-belonged to the place that we are and trusting that the wisdom will come, the solutions will come. But we're kind of at square one where we don't even speak the same language as the earth. And in my research, that language is the language of the senses, which builds off of, I'm not the first person to say that, but my PhD participants were very clear that the way that they communicate with the earth is through their body and through their sensory language, their sensory capacity. So body awareness, interoceptive awareness. This can be, you can speak in an auditory language to the earth, but really it's, if we can't even feel and sense what's happening within us when we are with more than human life forms, how can we even possibly begin to be in communion and building this new world together? And so I think about it as like very micro first. It's this relationship. It's a secure bond with the earth that parallels the same interpersonal processes as human to human relationships. The same needs are there: the need to belong, the need to feel safe, the need for our attachment figure, the earth, to be consistently available, warm, a being we can trust. And that needs to happen in a very specific place-based way. We can't attach to all humans, and so we can't attach to all forests or all rivers or all oceans. It has to start with what pulls your body, what creates aliveness and vitality and kind of that attraction through the sensory landscape, to begin listening to that and then following it. And that's kind of the first step of relationship. So that, I don't know if that really answers it, because it's not a solution so much as it has to, I think the relationship is the solution. And from this web of relationships, things will change. Robin Wall Kimmerer, indigenous writer from the US, wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, absolutely gorgeous book, Potawatomi botanist. She talks about like, how can we protect something we don't love? And when we love the earth loves us back. And it's not just loving the earth, it's being in that reciprocation of love, and love being absolutely just as deep, fulfilling, meaningful as human to human love. giving our bodies the ability to be safe and feel joy and reverence and sacredness and hope and vitality and and the physiological benefits of connecting with the earth, which I'm sure you know as well. I mean, we're talking about this is so important for people living with autoimmune disease, which the majority of those people are women. There's inflammation regulation that happens when we're around trees. It increases the functioning of interleukin-6 as well as natural killer cells. I mean, we don't even need to know all of that. Like, you can experience it yourself and see what happens, breathing in the phytoanisides. But it's almost like it was designed this way.
Look, we have this incredible, people talk about like miracle cures in kind of medicine and the pharma industry, and it's like, oh, look, we seem to have an actual kind of miracle cure-all, and it's nature.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I love what you said about connecting to where we live and the land that holds us, and reparenting ourselves in place, and that as being a first step that we can all do. And so important on a kind of political level as well as on a psychological and physiological level. And it's very achievable. That's a lovely first step. And I'm thinking maybe finding a tree friend locally, because obviously in ASA we make friends with 12 different trees throughout the year, and we find those trees locally. They're not all trees that we might find locally, but most of them are, or at least anyone anywhere. There'll be some of the trees that we can locate and kind of consider a new member of our family or our inner circle. But I'm thinking as well, for people listening to this on our mailing list too, this is something that anyone can do. Find a tree in your local area that's maybe one that's been growing for a while, like an ancient tree. Make friends with that tree, go visit that tree, and that's the beginning of a connection and an anchoring in the place that you live. Even if you've only lived there for a month, you can still anchor in the roots of a tree.
Yeah. In my book, Heartwood, I talk a lot about what it's done to me to have a family of aspen trees in Colorado that I've visited consistently now for years. And they've become like a family system, really. There's 3 of them, and not just seeing what changes happen to them through different seasons and different weather patterns. That's part of it, certainly, to feel like you actually know a place and the place knows you. But there's something much more emotional that's gone on there. And it's because, I don't know, it's like this absolutely spectacular thing that's opened for me. And I've had connections with trees in other places my whole life, but it's like they are the first that kind of showed me this much deeper, feels mystical at some level, but it's actually just emotional, psychological, physiological kind of bond and relationship that's available to all of us. And I really believe that, like, none of us are left out of the opportunity to be in deep reciprocal relationship, and the type of things that we can begin to hear over time and be woven into. And so I think there are transmissions that we can hear, meaning really just beginning to be able to listen deeply to the life and ecosystem and interconnectivity of what it is to, they're in a forest, they're already deeply in community, and humans kind of, we get to live in the myth that we're not, because we think it's just this body, and they physically are attached to each other through their roots and mycelium in a way that we aren't, but we are. And I've just received so much wisdom through hearing them, and through the body, like actually being able to feel like, what does it feel like to be a sovereign being? And then what does it feel like to be a part of the forest? And to consider, like, we are forests, actually. Humans are forests. And the mycelia that connect us, like, is our breath, is, our food and water systems. There's like ways we can think of our interconnectivity, and as well as our hearts and emotion, and how we are in loving connection with each other. That's also part of what it is to be interconnected. And so let us tend to that really well. Trees are so generous with how they make sure that, of course, if a being needs more sugars, or, is lacking in some way, they'll send that to that tree being. It's like, it should be the same with us as humans. And we have the opportunity to do that every day in small ways.
Beautiful, thank you. And I love that idea of like coming into our own sovereignty, like a tree, the strength of our own trunk and our bark that keeps us safe, and our rootedness and our ability to stretch out and grow and survive the storms, and the resilience that we see ourselves as strong, solid, and sovereign as a tree, and also interconnected. It's a lovely way of a lovely new way of seeing ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's not just a new way of seeing it, it's a new way of feeling it. And we
Yeah.
can live our lives from that rootedness. It makes the whole difference.
Yeah.
I wondered about the aspen, because we have these 12 trees within ACER, but we're starting to grow a bit wider. And actually, the aspen is going to be one of 2 new trees. We're going to be
Oh.
Pacific Madrone in Oregon, and
Uh-huh.
the aspen, well, which we were thinking of the aspen in Utah, but obviously also Colorado. Could
Yes.
you tell us a bit about your 3 aspens, what the main lessons you feel from these aspens, and also maybe a little bit about growing up in Colorado and how your nature connectedness developed through your upbringing, your early life?
Yeah, yeah. So I like to say that, or like to imagine that I really was formed by these mountains and these trees, because my mom, when she was pregnant with me, would spend a lot of time in this one particular valley. And we know with epigenetics that what she was responding to and loving and enjoying and feeling touched by actually did impact that her eggs and eventually me. And I like, yeah, I feel that I was like formed and my bones are very much in that land. Um, so the aspen tree, though, I mean, anyone who's seen one is so blessed. They are just absolutely stunning visually. And they are the largest living organism in the world after a certain mycelium. Um, and I think they're like, yeah, they're famous for their interconnectivity, and they don't just grow as individual trees. They technically it's one root system. And so a tree is a shoot out of that common root. So they're clones, and these trees are actually clones of one another. Um, their bark has this white powdery substance on it, which is actually kind of a natural sunscreen. And so indigenous communities would kind of, you can actually rub it off and like put it on your face. And it also has an aspect of aspirin. So there was a lot of ways that the tree was feeding and nourishing the people that lived amongst them. Um, they have these like knots that look like eyes, like all over the white trunk, that feel very like, I don't know, magical when you're around them. But they're technically a certain kind of fly, like bites the tree, and then that like widens into a knot over time. They turn amazing colors, like absolutely glorious, and their leaves are like little mirrors. They just shimmer and shine in the wind in a certain kind of way. But because they're clonal, when you're in an aspen forest, the colors in fall kind of happen as a forest. So instead of each individual tree changing its colors on its own, this happens more in community. So you kind of can feel the sense of what a communal being actually is like. And individual, but individual and togetherness is held in the aspen, I think, in a really special way that isn't paralleled with other tree families. Um, yeah, so that's a little bit about the aspen.
So much. And maybe when it comes to creating a tree journey for the aspen, maybe we could do a bit of it together if you have time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tree journeys are kind of like deep connections with each tree, and we do these guided imagery journeys where people merge with the tree and become the tree for a while, and kind of download, although I hate that word because it's like a tech analogy, but like bring in the wisdom of that being, and keep it within themselves. But I don't know any aspens very well, so yeah, this now as we expand our tree family, I'm starting collaborating with other people who know trees very well, so that they can be the kind of aunties.
Yes, oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah.
Sounds like you might be the person to ask for the aspen tree journey.
Yes, please. A lot of my book brings people back to this particular valley, kind of as a way to show what relationship with one particular tree being can do over time. And for me, I had, and I still do have, an autoimmune illness, and my relationship with the aspen family really changed how my autoimmune illness was living in my body. And I think that's a product of both the physiological benefits that, you know, nature science connection has already shown us, but also there's something else going on there. And I think that there's a recognition that occurred between them and me that helped my body regulate, and my nervous system specifically. So there's so many benefits of what trees can do for our nervous systems. And when we're in a society in which our nervous systems are hijacked all the time and in fight and flight, yeah, I think that is not to be undermined. So breathing, I'm sure you have people breathe with trees and do all kinds of regulation activities with them. But it's kind of beautiful to find, like, what is your body and this tree's kind of like special connection going to be, and that yeah, it's almost like its own imprint, its own blueprint, because we're so unique and they're so unique, and like we get to kind of create something that only we share, just like human to human bonds. Like there's something so special about the like particularities and specificities of each relationship. My relationship with, you know, my mom is not the same as my brother's relationship with my mother, and like how beautiful is that? It's like endlessly creative, and yeah.
I love that idea. And I think it's really inspiring because it helps us do what is sometimes quite difficult to do, which is actually like unplug from our tech, go outside, even if it's grey weather, and sit with a tree, even if it takes time, because it can be slow to start. And I think we're so used to quick fixes and dopamine rushes and kind of things that make us feel good straight away. And I think as well, what you were talking about before about being able to feel in our bodies, the way we communicate with the tree is through our bodies. And I was just thinking about how shut off many of us are from our bodies because of, well, just because of so many different factors in the way we live in the modern world, and how difficult it can be for people to feel.
Mm-hmm.
How that can be one of the things that psychedelics can help with, helping us actually feel visceral, like, as you say, interoception, like, oh, why is my left thigh feeling strange? What's that holding? And why is my throat feeling constrained? And I think, but with it can just be, it can take a while for us to come out of the freeze response and the traumatized lack of somatic experiencing to be able to do that. So I suppose it's kind of when people know that it can happen, but it can be slow, and that as we slowly start to thaw and feel that slowly over time, we can start to have that reciprocal relationship you talk about, but it might not be straight away. But that it's not just like, I think sometimes people see nature as like, oh, it's just as if it's kind of like, it, how to say this, and I don't know if you agree, but like, oh, it's just going for a little walk in nature. It's seen as just like a little frivolous thing on the side that's not going to change everything. But like you say, the physiological healing power is incredible. And this is one of the most amazing technology. Like, we invest so much in technology, but the wisdom of nature, the technology of nature, is the most extraordinary intelligence that there will ever be. So if we reframe in our mind, it's not just, oh, walking in the rain and sitting with the tree and getting my phone out and actually needing the dopamine from my phone. It's like, we'd have to take time to make this relationship, but it's worth
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's the message is slow down and slow down even further. And my PhD research, the participants I interviewed, who are all environmental activists and just incredible people, talked about pace. Slow pace is an anti-capitalist form of resistance, actually. So when you choose to go outside and be with nature, not as a utilitarian relationship, meaning like, oh, this is an object of beauty, let me enjoy that object. It's how can I be a participant in a subjective conversation, subject to subject. I'm a living subject. This is a living subject. There's no object here. So how would I want to interact with a being that is like alive, right? I would want to slow down, really be still and listen. Yeah, and know that this is going to take time. This isn't something that will awaken like the first time we try this. And to be to let that process also change us, the slowing down and like the emergence over time. So I think that's a beautiful invitation to think of like me just going on a very slow, mindful, participatory, experiential kind of like sojourn with nature is a way for me to practice anti-capitalism, because if that can be something that lives in my body, that's going to also affect my choices and the way I treat the world and the way I treat other humans. um yeah, I don't know, imagine if just like everybody was able to practice that, that would start seeding a different embodied way of being already. And in a society that is addicted to imperialism and growth and the growth paradigm and the growth myth, we need to be actively doing the opposite.
Lindsay, thank you so much for all of your wisdom. And there are so many things we didn't have a chance to talk about today, but I hope that we will in a future time. Maybe when you come to talk to us about Heartwood, when that we can have some other conversations. But I know that you do offer sessions to individuals and groups. So kind of consultant. Could you just, before we finish, could you just say a little bit about the kind of consultancy work that you do that people could get in touch with you for, either organizations or individuals?
Yes. So as an eco-doula, which is kind of about the idea of a midwife, so helping, we're in the midst of the sixth mass extinction event. We need to also transition new ways of being, new consciousnesses, new kind of embodied, yeah, we need newness and life. I like thinking of an eco-doula as a way to help us transition and transition well. So doing work with individuals and groups around connecting deeply to the earth and the way we've been talking about in this conversation. So emotional, embodied, deep and lasting bonds, as well as helping people process from the effects of climate collapse. So working with groups that have had their homes burned down in a fire that's a result of climate change, for example. And there's different kind of existential needs there that come up with events that yeah, we're kind of facing for the first time as a global community. So also nature connection is so important for kind of the functioning and well-being of groups. So it doesn't need to come from a place of crisis, but more from a place of, okay, how can we be forward thinking and really be active as a community about rooting ourselves into the earth, knowing that better ideas come, better well-being, and improves, yeah, the cohesion of companies or groups to do their jobs even better. But it's bigger than that. It's kind of like you said, returning us to our birthright. So I love working with people to kind of tailor that to make it possible and accessible.
Beautiful, thank you. And we'll have all your details on the page so people can contact you. And of course, just a shout out to anyone on our mailing list. This is kind of the last call now for the next cohort of ASA, which is beginning next month. Yeah, we're going to be starting a whole new group of people are going to be joining. So they'll be joining. The interim month will be for the Douglas fir, which is all around the interconnectedness at the mycelial level, and Suzanne Simard's work around mother trees. And I'm sure we're probably both mutual fangirls of Suzanne Simard, who's like, oh, the goddess. But yeah, but then we move on to June, which is the Hawthorn, which I think I'm really looking forward to. It's all about compassion and forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. And so yes, if you're listening to this and you're interested to join, there's still a little bit of time. And we'd love to have you if you want to start your relationship with trees.
Do it.
The most wonderful relationship. And it's a very calm relationship because there doesn't tend to be many arguments.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Great hugs, always
Yeah.
got your back.
Very peaceful.
Beautiful, yeah, very beautiful, and always loving.
Always, exactly. Yeah, perfect.
Who needs a husband when you can have a
That's what I think. Oh.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I can't wait to speak to you again. Good luck with all the projects you're doing now, and sweet.
Thank you for having me.